Hello, everybody. I hope you're all doing well tonight. Thank you for all the likes and other expressions. Oh, gee, I'm so glad to get this started already. Okay, so I don't think I have to tell you, there's not much joy in Mudville tonight. Ruth Bader Ginsburg has died, has passed. Oh, that was last night. And that was very significant to us. She was very significant. She was the leader of the left of center people on the court. She was very significant for a long time. She was the most significant defender, of women's rights on the court. It is said that what Thurgood Marshall was for black rights, she occupied a similar position with respect to women's rights. She's certainly considered one of the most significant justices of the Supreme Court in the history of the court, and she will go down that way. It's not often thought of, but if Al Gore had fought like a lion and hung in there in 2000, and had he been elected as the President of the United States, then it's likely that when Rehnquist died in 2005, that Ginsburg may well have become the first female Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. That, of course, would have been very, very significant in terms of the history of the United States. So this now leaves the court with three members of the what's known, as the liberal bloc on the court. And with five members of the conservative bloc. It's too early still to consider Roberts a swing vote, though. He swings more than he used to. And Steve tells me, space aliens background noise. Yes, I'm sorry, Steve. Carmen says, present with the notifications on. Thank you. Kay says, hi all. Steve says, hi, friends of the doctor. Kay says, share. And Avril says, hi, Kay, smooches everyone. Kay says, back at you, Avril. Steve says, last is best than all the rest. Hi, everyone. Carmen says, hi, Stoner. Steve says, the mighty Casey has struck out. Kay says, what a great loss for this country. Carmen says, I wish it could have continued, however, we knew it was coming. Carmen says, I can't share and invite, as usual. Carmen is in 7-day fascist book jail. I'm sorry to hear it. I'm also sorry to have forgotten to get rid of the promo so you can see me. Hi. I'm sorry I did that. I guess I'm a little off tonight. forgetting myself. Steve says, back at you. So let's get on. Let's talk about what she meant to everybody and what the implications are of her passing. So I'm going to start with an article from the Intelligencer, that I would like to share. If I can find it. I thought I had found it. Here it is. Here we go. So now you're just seeing the Intelligencer. So let me fix that for you. This is an article by Eric Levitz. And, oh, by the way, I forgot to put down the links for tonight in my description, but I'll take care of that later. I'll put in links for all of these that I'm doing. So this appeared actually on the 3rd of August, 2020. So it appeared some time ago, but it was relevant for Ruth's passing. Okay, and it announced 2 GOP senators opposed filling Supreme Court vacancy in 2020. Everybody knew that Ruth Bader Ginsburg was sick, so they were paying attention to her time actually running out. The article says, one thing Americans don't have to worry about running out of in 2020 is a reason for anxiety. Especially true for liberals. From Blue America's perspective, each day's headlines seem to herald dystopia's accelerating approach as small businesses shutter, states go broke, the post office gets gutted, new viruses with pandemic potential get discovered, Antarctica's ice sheets gently weep, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg is rushed to the hospital over and over again. That sentence was well done, wasn't it? But the progressives may be able to cross off RBG is going to pass away before November and be replaced with a 40-year-old Federalist Society theocrat and or QAnon blogger from their list of reasons for perpetual panic. Did I say that this was written by Eric Levitz? If not, I should have. After Antonin Scalia's death in 2016, Mitch McConnell infamously refused to dignify Barack Obama's nomination of Merrick Garland with so much as a hearing. Not that Garland was any flaming lefty. At the time, Senate Majority Leader argued that confirming Garland in an election year would be undemocratic, as it would deny, quote, the American people, unquote, a chance to, quote, have a voice in the selection of their next Supreme Court justice, unquote. But as Ginsburg's health woes have fueled speculation about a potential vacancy in 2020, McConnell has refined this principle, explaining that it is only wrong to confirm a Supreme Court justice in an election year when the White House and Senate are controlled by different parties. Oh. Since the GOP holds both today, Republicans have a clear mandate from the American people to consolidate conservative dominance of the Supreme Court. Never mind that the Republican president lost the popular vote in 2016, or that Americans delivered a historic landslide to Democrats in the last round of federal elections, as Levitz reminds us. Anyway, McConnell offered a more coherent rationale for his position in a luncheon last year. He said, quote, everything else changes, unquote. What can't be undone is a lifetime appointment to a young man or woman who believes in the quaint notion that the job of the judge is to follow the law, unquote. That might have been a coherent rationale, but I'm not sure that rationale makes any sense because there have been a lot of times when these right-wing justices have not followed the law. For this reason, Senate Majority Whip John Thune has said that Republicans would fill any Supreme Court vacancy that comes up between now and January 20th, 2021. He said this by August 3rd, even as such an opening arrived after a Democratic victory in November. Now that's cheeky. But not everyone in McConnell's caucus is on board for such a power grab. Specifically, Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski said that filling a Supreme Court vacancy before 2021 would be, quote, a double standard, unquote. And she, quote, would not support it, unquote. Her GOP colleague, Chuck Grassley, meanwhile, told NBC News that he also felt filling a vacancy would violate the party's 2016 standard and that, quote, he couldn't move forward with it, unquote, were he still the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. To be sure, moderate Republicans' promises to stand their ground against partisan excess are an unreliable currency, and McConnell's 53 seats give him room to lose Murkowski, Grassley, and one more protest vote and still secure a justice's confirmation, since Mike Pence would break any 50-50 tie. But internal dissent isn't the only hitch in McConnell's plan for entrenching Republican dominance of the judicial branch. In the wake of Garland's defeat, Trump's victory, and the ensuing blitzkrieg of far-right judicial appointments, progressive groups began organizing behind judicial reform. Their efforts led multiple Democratic primary candidates to endorse adding justices to the Supreme Court. That idea remains a minority position within the party, but it's no longer an unthinkable one. You remember, Leavitt said this on August 3rd. It is now September 19th, and we'll shortly see what other people think now on September 19th. If McConnell opted to use the Senate's limited time and energy in the middle of a pandemic to race through the confirmation of a far-right Supreme Court nominee in brazen defiance of his own rationale for blocking Garland, there would no longer be a legitimate independent judiciary for moderate Democrats to defend against the progressive court-packing schemes. Or so Tim Kaine is warning his Republican colleagues. Mr. Excitement, Tim Kaine, had the following to say, quote, we knew basically they were lying in 2016 when they said, quote, oh, we can't do this because it's an election year, unquote. We knew they didn't want to do it because it was President Obama, unquote, said Senator Tim Kaine, a Democrat. Virginia said in an interview. Kaine, the party's last vice presidential nominee and a lawmaker with a reputation as an institutionalist, that's some kind of excuse for not doing anything, said confirming a nominee of President Donald Trump this year could compel Democrats to consider adding seats to the high court. Oh, compel. Strong language, compel. Quote, if they show that they're unwilling to respect precedent, rules, and history, then they can't feign surprise when others talk about using a statutory option that we have that's fully constitutional in our availability, he said. And quote again, I don't want to do that, but if they act in such a way, they may push it to an inevitability. So they need to be careful about that. This by itself might not stay McConnell's hand. As the majority leader has explained, a Supreme Court justice is worth an awful lot, given that it's far from certain that Democrats will gain control of the Senate next year. But let alone that a Democratic majority reliant on Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema will have the votes to, quote, pack the court, unquote. But Mitch McConnell might be happy to take his chances. But the whole point of the GOP's judicial project is to ensure conservatives' influence over federal policy against the long-term threat posed by the American public's growing liberalism. And that if the right Supreme Court supermajority is won through a process that even Chuck Grassley deems unseemly, it will be difficult for a reactionary Supreme Court to sustain its legitimacy as the millennial generation share of the electorate steadily grows. The fact that we are already at a point where Tim Kaine feels comfortable floating the threat of court packing does not augur well for the long-term sustainability of using judicial power to shove conservative policy down the throats of a progressive majority, which is to say, if the confirmation of conservative justice this year that doesn't provoke Democratic court packing in 2021, it could result in California nullifying Supreme Court rulings by the end of the decade. So the next time you find yourself worrying about the health of Ruth Bader Ginsburg or Stephen Breyer, just remember that their deaths won't necessarily herald the end of Roe versus Wade. They might just herald the end of the United States. If you didn't catch that, what Levitz is saying is that if California nullifies Supreme Court rulings by decade's end and then tries to enforce that, that might just herald the end of the United States. He's hinting at a possible secession of the Pacific Coast states from the United States. There's plenty of population there, and between California, Washington, and Oregon, they would make a fair-sized nation with a population greater than Canada's, by the way. And if the Pacific Coast nations were to join up with Canada, then that would be a fairly sizable nation. In population, it would rival Germany, for example. And that doesn't include any further accessions like Arizona joining the Pacific Coast states, or Nevada joining the Pacific Coast states, or New Mexico joining the Pacific Coast states. I mean, it's possible other United States would follow. Anyway, that's a bridge too far just now, but just mentioning the possibility. Anyway, let me now share a more timely article, or I should say, a more recent article. This one's from Common Dreams, written by Jessica Corbett yesterday upon the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, advocate for equality and reason, dead at 87. On her deathbed, she told her granddaughter, quote, "My most fervent wish is that I will not be replaced until a new president is installed. If Trump should win again, that might be a very long time. But anyway. Sparking a swift flood of condolences along with fear for what the future holds, the U.S. Supreme Court announced that Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg died in her home Friday evening, surrounded by family due to, quote, complications of metastatic pancreas cancer, unquote, at the age of 87. Since Ginsburg was nominated to the High Court by President Bill Clinton in 1993, she has gained global notoriety for her impact on gender equality and civil liberties in the United States, with fans affectionately nicknaming the tireless and trailblazing justice, quote, notorious RBG, unquote. That's for notorious in a good way. Her death, which comes after a series of recent health scares that alarmed the public, means that President Donald Trump may have the opportunity to name her successor with help from the Republican-controlled Senate in the weeks before the November 3rd general election. In the days before her death, which will undoubtedly spur more political chaos ahead of an election with incredibly high stakes, Ginsburg dictated a statement to her granddaughter, Clara Spera, quote, my most fervent wish is that I will not be replaced until a new president is installed, unquote. And there's a tweet to that effect calling for us to hold true what she asked for, but by Vanita Gupta. Social media and news sites on Friday quickly filled with calls for honoring RBG's dying wish and concerns about what it will mean for the country if Trump and the Senate force through another nominee, but also touching tributes to Ginsburg, long celebrated as a feminist icon. Quote, the passing of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg is a tremendous loss to our country, said Senator Bernie Sanders. And quote again, she was an extraordinary champion, of justice and equal rights, and will be remembered as one of the great justices in modern American history, unquote. She will be. At this point, I'd like to point out that she and Bernie were the products of the same high school, James Madison High School in Brooklyn, New York. Chuck Schumer is another product of that same high school. Not so well thought of he, but nevertheless very prominent. Quote, wow, we're speechless, unquote, tweeted the environmental advocacy group 350.org. Quote, R.I.P. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, an advocate for equality and reason, a feminist, and an icon who held on in the name of justice, unquote. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell vowed Friday night that President Trump's nominee, quote, President Trump's nominee will receive a vote on the floor of the United States Senate, unquote. Though expected, the GOP position was met with intense opposition. In a statement that recognized RBG as, quote, a stalwart defender of our democracy and the rule of law, noting that, quote, she was a champion for gender equality, racial justice, LGBTQ plus rights, voting rights, common sense, campaign financing laws, fair redistricting, and more. Common Cause President Karen Hobart Flynn, who addressed the issue of her replacement, said, the advice and consent clause was intended by the framers of the Constitution to be a serious and deliberative process not one that is rushed or timed to achieve maximum political leverage weeks before the election. Common Cause calls on every U.S. Senator of conscience to do everything in their power to ensure a thorough, careful, and transparent vetting process. A rush confirmation before the election or during the lame duck Senate session will only increase cynicism among the American people and further undermine the legitimacy of the Supreme Court. And so Vanita Gupta, president and CEO of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, concurred that the Senate should hold off on a vote, charging that, quote, it would be an insult to the legacy for this president to select a justice he promises will assail our rights and undermine, upend, and unravel our democratic norms for generations. Now, I think this is an overstatement, the reason being because if we take over the Congress, then we can add justices to the Supreme Court and nullify the effect of any justice that is now rammed through by Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell. Going on, Ginsburg's, quote, wisdom served to remind us the Supreme Court belonged to all of us, not to any party or politician, unquote. Quote again, her rulings were the embodiment of those words etched on the building in which she served, equal justice under law. Freedom has lost a stalwart champion, unquote. It has also lost a stalwart champion of equal justice under law. Even more importantly, quote, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, but deliberate and dedicated in her craft, created a more just world, unquote. Declared Ayanna Pressley, a Democrat of Massachusetts, 5'1" in stature. She stood as a giant for justice and equality. In her name, we press on. We must turn our collective grief into action. Do not let up for a moment. Our democracy is at stake, unquote. Crystal Ball said, rest in peace, R.I.P., RBG. And God help us all. And Linda Sarsour said, Lord have mercy. May Ruth Bader Ginsburg rest in peace. May we not be in peace until we defeat the fascist in the White House. But Mitch McConnell going to try to push this through. We need to organize, officially code red. Here's a picture of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Shannon Watts tweeted, and now we fight for Ruth Bader Ginsburg. We fight just like she did. And Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer made his position clear Friday, saying the American people should have a voice in their selection of their next Supreme Court justice. Therefore, this vacancy should not be filled until we have a new president. My statements from Chucky are, of course, very welcome, but we need to have him doing something, not just making nice statements. He has to leave little Chucky Schmucky behind for a while and do something. Shauna Thomas, co-founder and executive director of the women's group Ultraviolet, joined the chorus of advocates pressuring the Senate to not replace Ginsburg until a new president is sworn in, praising the late justice as, quote, an icon, a pioneer, a hero, and a legend. Thomas said that, quote, RGB did her part, fighting for our rights until the very end. Now it's on us to continue the work to protect our rights, lives, health, and freedoms. We honor RBG by digging into the good trouble and fight she devoted her life to in ensuring that her last wishes are honored. And the Reverend William J. Barber II said, "How do you mourn the loss of a great champion for justice like Ruth Bader Ginsburg? You mourn deeply and you vow to continue her work with even greater resolve. Her death must bring us to life." And Reverend Dr. William J. Barber II also tweeted, "No one who loved her work on voting rights, the women's rights, or corporate responsibility can stay home and not vote. We must renew our resolve to fight as she fought." Responding to her final words, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said, "We have lost a giant in the history of our nation with the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. It is heartbreaking that in her final moment she was, as so many others, preoccupied with what would happen after her passing. I want to make one thing clear. We can and must fight." Unquote. And she tweeted, "Now is not the time for cynicism or hopelessness. There is and continues to be political possibility to preserve our democracy and move forward. It will require each and every one of us from the streets to the Senate to grow in courage, strength, and strategy, but it is possible." And another tweet, "Our first, number one priority is to do everything possible to secure Electoral College victory in November. This is the fight of and for our lives. This has always been true, and it becomes more true each day. Opponents of democracy need your resignation to succeed. Don't give it to them." The consequences of RBG's passing are many, said Democratic New York State Senator Jessica Ramos. Quote, "May her memory be a blessing and give us the fortitude we'll need to do the work that lies ahead to save our country." Unquote. Former Labor Secretary and current the University of California, Berkeley professor Bob Reich wrote, quote, "I am truly crushed. Justice Ginsburg's indomitable strength and courage was a guiding light in these dark times." Unquote. And he tweeted, "We'll never be able to fully convey our gratitude to her commitment to justice and equality in the face of incredible odds, which she carried out until her last breath on this earth. I'm heartbroken for her and her family and for all she meant to our country. May her legacy continue to inspire the struggle for a more just America." Quote, "Our nation has lost a justice of historic stature," unquote, said Chief Justice John Roberts. And quote again, "We at the Supreme Court have lost a cherished colleague. Today we mourn, but with confidence that future generations will remember Ruth Bader Ginsburg as we knew her, a tired and resolute champion of justice." Unquote. The liberal justice's life was captured in the 2018 documentary RBG, as well as On the Basis of Sex, a biographical film released that same year starring Felicity Jones as a young Ginsburg. As the New York Times summarized in her obituary on Friday, Justice Ginsburg was born in Brooklyn, graduated from Cornell in 1954, and began law school at Harvard. But by the way, I want to remind you, I graduated from Cornell in 1960. After moving to New York with her husband, she transferred to Columbia, where she earned her law degree. She taught at Rutgers in Columbia and was a leading courtroom advocate of women's rights before joining the court. As the director of the Women's Rights Project of the ACLU in the 1970s, she brought a series of cases before the court that helped establish constitutional protections against sex discrimination. by Representative Debbie Dingell of Michigan, said Friday that she was mourning a loss of not only a fair and strong jurist, but a woman who opened doors wider for everyone. Ruth Bader Ginsburg fought for justice and equality, but deeply American values. RBG not only blazed her own trail in the legal field, but she inspired generations, unquote. Ginsburg, quote, forever changed our country with her tireless advocacy for women's rights and gender equality, declared the group indivisible, sorry. And quote again, the Supreme Court will never be the same, unquote. RBG's husband, attorney Marty Ginsburg, died in 2010. Quote, the next day his wife, the justice, was on the bench reading an important opinion she had authored for the court. NPR noted on Friday, quote, she was there, she said, because Marty would have wanted it, unquote. The justice is survived by their two children, Jane Carroll Ginsburg and James Stephen Ginsburg, as well as 4 grandchildren. According to the Supreme Court statement, a private interment service will be held at Arlington National Cemetery. Very, very sad, of course. Next, the inevitable reaction, also from Common Dreams. Now this one from Jessica Corbett and published today. We can and must fight, quote unquote. Death of RBG sparks Senate showdown and calls for Supreme Court reform. And here is the hopeful thing. As mourners left flowers and signs outside the U.S. Supreme Court building overnight following Justice Ginsburg's death Friday evening, President Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell vowed to force through her replacement with just weeks until the November election, while progressive lawmakers and organizers promised to fight the GOP's hypocritical effort to shift the court to the right. Acknowledging Ginsburg's dying wish that she will not be replaced until a new president is installed, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez declared that, quote, we can and must fight, unquote, and that fight to, quote, preserve our democracy and move forward, unquote, the congressman said, quote, will require each and every one of us from the streets to the Senate to grow in courage, strength, and strategy. And she also tweeted, you do not need to, nor should you ignore your fears. There is plenty to be afraid of. But we have possibilities before us. We can win. We can succeed, but we cannot do it alone. We will need the people. We must get to work. Everyone matters. Everyone has something to give. And Mitch McConnell, who in that 2016 led Republicans' months-long blockade of Merrick Garland, Obama's nominee to the High Court, citing the upcoming presidential election, said Friday, with less than 2 months until the next election, actually just a little more than a month and a half, isn't it? Probably about a month and a half from now, actually, because it's November 3rd, right? Like 45 days. The president took to Twitter Saturday to urge the GOP-controlled upper chamber to approve his unannounced pick, quote, without delay, unquote. The majority leader Not only without delay, but I think with unseemly haste, would have been fair to say. The majority leader and president's position are widely expected, particularly given their ongoing joint effort to remake the federal judiciary by ramming through right-wing lifelong appointees, but provoked pushback from top Democrats, including the party's presidential nominee Joe Biden. The former vice president said that, quote, voters should pick the president and the president should pick the justice to consider. What an inspiring statement, right? And Liz Warren said later, Ruthie's groundbreaking work as a legal advocate for women led to a distinguished career as a federal judge and a Supreme Court justice. Her lifelong dedication to fighting for justice for everyone and her love for our nation will be sorely missed. With voting already underway for the 2020 elections, Ruthie's most fervent wish, quote unquote, was for her replacement not to be named, quote, until a new president is installed, unquote. We must honor her wish. Biden and congressional Democrats called on elected Republicans to follow their own made-up rules, referencing Senator McConnell's 2016 remarks about Garland and giving, quote, the people a voice. Bernie Sanders said in a statement Saturday that now, quote, Senator McConnell is cementing a shameful legacy of brazen hypocrisy. Actually, it's a shameful legacy of lust for power. That's what it is. The only thing that matters is power. But as a former columnist, TV columnist for MSNBC, was very fond of saying, politics ain't a beanbag, Senator Sanders. It's too bad that you never learned that, Bernie. Quote, thankfully, not all Senate Republicans agree, unquote, with plowing ahead to confirm a Trump appointee, noting that Senator Lisa Murkowski reportedly said Friday, shortly before Ginsburg's death, that she is against an appointment this close to an election and, quote, would not vote to confirm a Supreme Court nominee. I'm not aware that she said that on Friday. We read something from, she did. She said it again on Friday. That's important, that she would not vote to confirm a nominee of the Supreme Court before the election. For those unaware, Schumer below is quoting what Mitch McConnell said in 2016. And in Schumer's tweet, he said the American people should have a voice in the selection of the next Supreme Court justice. Therefore, this vacancy should not be filled until we have a new president. 4 Senate Republicans would have to join with all Democrats to block Trump from appointing a third justice of the court, following Neil Gorsuch in 2017 and Brett Kavanaugh in 2018. Although Senator Mitt Romney didn't share his position on a vote in his statement about Ginsburg's death, former Utah politician Jim DeBacchus tweeted Friday, quote, a high-level Romney insider tells me Mitt Romney has committed to not confirming a Supreme Court justice nominee until after Inauguration Day. I'm afraid someone from the Mitt Romney camp has called that a rumor that is grossly false. As Sanders pointed out, other GOP lawmakers have previously said they're opposed to a confirmation vote this close to an election. Specifically, Senator Grassley, Iowa, Susan Collins of Maine, and Lindsey Graham. According to Sanders, quote, the right thing to do here is clear. The Republicans in the Senate know it, and many of them have stated it clearer than I could. We should let the voters decide, period, unquote. Like Romney, Collins didn't address the new battle over the empty court seat in her Friday comments. but she has been pilloried for the pivotal role she played in Kavanaugh's confirmation and faces a tight race, making her a key target for those who support honoring the justice's dying wish or working to elect by Joe Biden. Now, today, Collins has announced that she will not vote to confirm a nominee before the election. She hasn't said what would happen after the election if Trump were to lose, but her specific statement was before the election, she's not going to vote to confirm a nominee. So, that is interesting. She joins Murkowski in saying that. Although Graham had said in October 2018 that if an opening comes in the last year of President Trump's term and the primary process has started, we'll wait for the next election, unquote, the Senate Judiciary Committee chair seemed to shift his position on Saturday. He said, I fully understand where President at real Donald Trump is coming from. And Donald Trump, of course, had said, at GOP, we were put in this position of power and importance to make decisions for the people who so proudly elected us, the most important of which has long been considered to be the selection of United States Supreme Court justices. We have this obligation without a delay. Now, David Sirota made a statement, at this point that I'll get into later, so I'm not going to quote it here. I'm going to go right on. I'm going to go on to David's article, in just a moment, and we will check that out. But there were some other statements made in this article that I'm not going to go through at this point because it's getting late. And these things are pretty much a repeat of what other people have said. It is important, though, to mention Ellie Mistal, who's a justice correspondent for The Nation. His statement is important because, the article says, Ginsburg's death and the political battle it sparked also renewed calls for reforming the Supreme Court. Ellie Mistal, a Nation's justice correspondent, wrote just after midnight that, quote, should Democrats ever hold that power again, they must act. The addition of 2 justices is simply a proportional response necessary to right the wrongs committed by McConnell. The addition of 10 justices, as I have advocated, puts the Supreme Court on a path towards long-term reform. So, Ellie Mistal is calling for adding 10 justices to the Supreme Court. If those 10 are added, all during the first term of a Democratic president, then, of course, the balance of the Supreme Court would be totally changed. But to go on with what Mistal says, quote, this must be our fight now. We must do everything we can to stop Senator McConnell from filling Ginsburg's seat, and however that turns out, we must retake political power and reform a Supreme Court that has been irrevocably broken by McConnell's ongoing hypocrisy. Mistal continued, that fight seems daunting, but it is no more difficult than the battles Ginsburg herself fought and won over the course of her storied career. And Ellie Mistal he retweeted a tweet by Mondaire Jones that I'll read in just a minute. Said, thank you at Mondaire Jones, as at Brian E. Fallon said last night. There is one play, and this is that play. And Mondaire Jones stated the play specifically. Okay, Mondaire Jones, to remind you, is the Democratic and progressive U.S. House candidate from the New York 17th Congressional District, who is likely to join the squad when he gets into Congress. I think he's currently favored to win in his race. It's not as much of a lock as Jamal Bowman has in the New York. I think Jamal is in the New York 16th. But it's predominantly a Democratic district, and he's very likely to win it. He says, let's not mince words. Under no circumstance should Donald Trump and Senator McConnell replace RBG with a partisan right-wing justice. But if they do, the next Congress absolutely must expand the Supreme Court. And he refers to my latest for Data Progress, which is at dataforprogress.org/blog/2020-9/19 9/19/19/ if Trump replaces RBG, expand the court. So that's a blog post by Mondaire Jones at Data for Progress that when you get the link to this article, you might want to look up and read. And University of Michigan professor Juan Cole conferred, writing that, quote, if the Democrats win both the presidency and the Senate, they must do something about the dictatorship of the minority on the court. And they ought to come in prepared to introduce serious reforms so that our laws reflect the will of our 330 million people rather than that of a few corrupt billionaires allied with hypocritical religious fundamentalists, unquote. You can say that again, Professor Juan Cole. At least one progressive in Congress issued a similar call in the wake of Ginsburg's death. Senator Ed Markey, who just pulled off a major primary win, tweeted Friday night that Mitch McConnell set the precedent. No Supreme Court vacancies filled in an election year. If he violates it when Democrats control the Senate in the next Congress, we must abolish the filibuster and expand the Supreme Court. Well, all I have to say about that is, whatever happens, we've got to abolish the filibuster. And I think whatever happens, we have to expand the Supreme Court. It doesn't matter to me if they don't fill this seat. We still have to expand the Supreme Court. It still leaves the right with a 5-4 majority, and the right represents the corporates in our country almost entirely. I think the liberal justices are a bit too friendly to the corporations also, but not as much as the conservative justices on the Supreme Court. They are bought and paid for by the corporations, every one. And even though John Roberts sometimes shifts over to the liberal side for certain decisions, he doesn't do it when corporate issues are involved. He's a corporatist through and through. The American people don't like that. The majority of people don't like that. So the court has to be expanded whatever happens. Whatever happens. Next. Tonight, going on right now, most probably, unless it's already over, there's a vigil outside the Supreme Court and national solidarity events to honor Ruth Beta Ginsburg. She gave all she could with literally all she had. Now it's our turn, and the vigil is a candlelight vigil at the Supreme Court. It was at 8 p.m. tonight. She gave all she could. It's our turn. National advocacy groups joined together today to organize a candlelight vigil outside the Supreme Court building in Washington, D.C., and encourage solidarity events across the country to honor the legacy of Justice Ginsburg, who died Friday after a long battle with cancer at the age of 87. She gave all she could and literally all she had. Now it's our turn, says a Facebook event for the D.C. gathering, hosted by Women's March, Planned Parenthood Action, Demand Justice, and Ultraviolet. Tonight, join us in front of the Supreme Court at 8 p.m. ET or in solidarity at your local courthouse. Sign up now to join for a socially distanced vigil. Be sure to wear a mask. May her memory be a revolution, says the meme. And there are some quotes of the kind I previously have read. Demand Justice Executive Director Brian Fallon tweeted a list of top priorities. We're unopposed Trump's nominee prior to the election, invoking the GOP's own rule from 2016. Defeat Trump on November 3rd. Keep the seat open until Biden takes office. If GOP rams Trump, pick through anyway, add seats to the course. This is the play. There is no other play. Yeah, there are other plays. You could impeach Brett Kavanaugh for perjury. He undoubtedly committed perjury. In my view, it can be proved. I think Clarence Thomas committed perjury. You can probably get him off the court too. I think Sam Alito committed perjury. You can get him too. And of course, any new justice they put through, you could impeach on grounds that he violated the precedent set by Mitch McConnell. That Mitch violated that precedent, that his ramming through, was illegitimate, and so he's impeached. Impeachment is a political process. Congress can impeach for any reason. It gets to define what a high crime, and misdemeanor is. So, there are other plays, but to be fair, probably the best play is just to ignore what was done and add those 10 seats to the court. That would work. And give a new Democratic president the ability to fill all 10 of those seats in his first term. And Planned Parenthood, of course, and the Women's March, supporting Justice Ginsburg, as a hero. Now we must fight for her legacy. We must fight for all the women who will come after us. We must fight to defend our democracy. There cannot be a new nominee till January. If Trump tries to confirm one before then, there will be massive resistance on a scale this country has never seen before, and Women's March is committed to mobilizing the millions of women who march with us to protect on our liberties. That's fine, folks, but no pussy hats this time. It has to be a serious march, dead serious. And people need to wear helmets because they're going to need them when Barr marches out his toughs. People are going to have to come prepared if there's a women's march. They're going to have to be ready. Next in the lineup is Dave Sirota's statement. And it's specifically about Trump. And I think it was perhaps, from my point of view, the most significant reaction yet to RBG's death. It's entitled, Chuck Schumer Needs to Fight Trump's SCOTUS Pick. It's by David Sirota, and Andrew Perez. And they say that Chuck Schumer has the power to try to stop Trump's nominee, but he has previously caved to the GOP on judges. The only way he'll put up a fight is if he feels pressure from his left. The article itself starts off with, "The 2020 wasn't apocalyptic enough for you. Now comes the death of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg and the prospect of a Supreme Court battle in the final weeks of the most critical election in the nation's modern history. As Republicans are already promising a vote on a nominee from Donald Trump, the obvious question is, what can be done to stop conservatives' full takeover of the nation's high court for the rest of our lives?" Quote, "We don't have all the answers, but we have one answer among many. A serious New York Democratic candidate needs to step up and announce a primary challenge to Senator Chuck Schumer, who already has a record of helping fast-track Donald Trump's judicial appointments. That primary challenge needs to be announced right now. And it needs to be clear that the primary challenge will be a referendum on Schumer's record on Trump judges. As Minority Leader Schumer will lead Senate Democrats, as President Donald Trump and Senator Mitch McConnell inevitably try to install a justice onto the court sometime before Trump has to leave office, should he lose the 2020 election. That means Schumer needs to face maximum pressure every single day to use all possible power that his caucus has, and it has power, to stop a Trump appointment, not just put pressure as in phone calls and protests, pressure as in you will be voted out of office pressure. Schumer has previously agreed to advance Trump judges. We know Schumer needs that kind of pressure because, as Vox reported in 2018, he agreed to a deal, quote, to fast-track the confirmations of 15 Trump-nominated judicial picks. Additionally, under Schumer's leadership, members of the Democratic caucus provided votes to confirm Trump's two previous judges, Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh, who supplied those votes. In Kavanaugh's case, it was Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, I believe, and in Gorsuch's case, I think as well. I think there might have been some others in Gorsuch's case, too. We also know that Democrats have periodically voted to install Trump judges on lower courts. You could argue that there was nothing Schumer could do to prevent conservative Democrats from voting the way they did, but that's bullshit. Schumer controls the party apparatus and its fundraising machine. If his excuse is he can't do anything, then he shouldn't be the leader. Schumer and Democrats have chronically mismanaged judicial appointments. Obama left office with a Supreme Court seat open and far too many district and court of appeals vacancies. Republicans have rushed to fill those seats, and Democrats have rubber-stamped most of their nominees with little fight, while House Democrats and Senate Republicans haven't managed to agree on a new COVID-19 relief bill since March. Democrats this week helped confirm 8 new district court judges this week. Yes, he said this week twice. It's true that if Republicans hold together, then they could vote a Supreme Court nominee with a simple majority. That is, if they're able to force a vote, and it's not a given they will be able to if Democrats use all of their power. And in the section called Grinding the Senate to a Halt, Sirota says, the Senate runs on the unanimous consent system, which basically means that to do its most basic business, all senators must consent. You have to remember, David Sirota knows this because he was on Bernie Sanders' staff previously. He has Senate experience as a staff member. In this situation, Senate Democrats have the power to use that system to grind everything to a halt. They can refuse to grant unanimous consent for the smallest things. They can force the reading of entire bills aloud. They can hold up the federal budget that the government needs to run. They can use these tactics to try to push back any confirmation hearings on a potential nominee. And they can try to do these things at least until after the next president is installed, all while they remind the public of the hypocrisy of GOP senators who said they would not try to install a judge during an election year. If Trump loses or if Republicans lose the Senate, then any semblance of moral authority to move the nomination forward will have completely collapsed. The electorate will have explicitly rejected the people responsible for it. While it would be naive to think that quaint concerns about the consent of the governed will rule the day with most Senate Republicans, if this shifts even a few into the no camp, then we will have won. Moreover, if Arizona Democrat Mark Kelly wins his race against GOP incumbent Martha McSally to fill the remainder of John McCain's term, he would be seated at the end of November rather than in January. But continued obstructionist tactics might yet be needed to prevent them from using the lame duck session to ram a nominee through. But of course, that means at the end of November, if Mark Kelly wins, if he wins at that point, then it will no longer be 4 senators that needed to block the confirmation, but only 3. Only 3 senators needed. So it might be easier to block it then because Mark Kelly will come into it. Okay. If Republicans still go forward with an appointment, then all of this becomes the justification for the Democrats to immediately pass legislation in the new Congress to expand the court. It would certainly be unprecedented, but we are living in unprecedented times, and this is what a Democratic leader must be forced to try to do. And the best way to force a senator to do something is to make clear they're risking their job if they don't do that thing. I couldn't agree more with David Sirota here. I also want to point out that there are so many Republican senators on the bubble right now. Steve Daines in Montana is on the bubble. Cory Gardner is on the bubble. Martha McSally is on the bubble. Tom Tillis is on the bubble. Of course, Susan Collins is on the bubble. That's 5 right there. There are reports now that even Lindsey Graham is on the bubble. That's 6. There are more, okay, that are on the bubble. Some would argue Shelley Moore Capito is on the bubble. Okay, in West Virginia, that Paula Jean Swearingen might just beat her. John Cornyn looks like he's in a close race with MJ Hagar, as well. We are looking at perhaps a dozen, perhaps even 14 Republican senators who have a chance to lose. Now, a Democratic sweep of all 14, of course, is very optimistic. But Joni Ernst has to watch out. She has to watch out, in Iowa. Teresa Greenfield is close to her, in Iowa. With so many GOP senators on the bubble, they are not going to want to take this vote for Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump before the election on November 3rd, because taking this vote for the nominee of Donald Trump might be the thing that pushes them out of the Senate. Might be the thing that pushes them out of the Senate. It's very possible. Going on, New York has plenty of Democrats who could primary Schumer. Schumer has been in the Senate long enough to know exactly how to make life impossible for Trump and Republicans. Yes, he could just use Mitch McConnell's tactics. Up until now, he has chosen not to do that. He cannot make that choice now. And the only way to best guarantee that he won't is for a major Democrat in New York to step up right now and make clear they're running against him in the 2022 primary, and they will make his behavior in this Supreme Court fight the central issue of their campaign. New York is a blue state. It has plenty of potentially powerful contenders. It has Democratic state lawmakers. It has Democratic congresspeople, including a very well-known one from the Bronx. It has statewide elected officials. Yeah, Letitia James, the Attorney General, who could run while perhaps prosecuting Donald Trump at the same time if Donald Trump is beaten in the election. And maybe even if he's not. It has New York City officials. There is no shortage of progressive Democrats in that state who could run credible, well-financed campaigns. We know from past experience. Now, one person I'd like to see try again is Zephyr Teachout. She'd be very good upstate. Not quite as strong in the city, but she'd be very good upstate. And that might get her elected. We know from past experience that Democratic primaries can quickly force establishment Democrats to suddenly step up their game. One example of many, when conservative Arkansas Democrat Blanche Lincoln in 2010 faced a progressive primary challenge, she suddenly shifted from a reliable Wall Street ally into a populist who championed a crackdown on the derivatives that blew up the global economy in the financial crisis. As the Wall Street Journal noted at the time, she shifted because she knew she could pay an electoral price at home if she didn't. There's even more potential of such a dynamic when it comes to Schumer, because New York is a reliable Democratic state. There is literally no rationale for him to wuss out on this. Sure, maybe on his own, Schumer would end up going soft and letting Trump and McConnell steamroll their way through the Senate. But he might, which is exactly why someone needs to step up. We have to remember also that Schumer has been looking to his left, of late. he's been trying to put through bills that are definitely populist, okay, in character. He and Elizabeth Warren just have come forward with a bill to do something about student debt. Not forgive it all, but forgive at least 50,000 of it. And he's come forward with various environmental things lately and pronouncements on the Green New Deal, suggesting that he's much more favorable to the Green New Deal than he used to be. So the point is, Schumer is a little bit worried about his left as things get a little more progressive during these troubled times. So that's where we are, okay, at this point. There is space for someone to announce a primary fight against him right now. I hope they do. That's the most effective thing I've heard people say in terms of a specific reaction to begin to put the pressure on the Republicans. If Schumer moves to tie up the Senate, then other Democratic candidates across the whole United States running against the Republican senators on the bubble can inform the constituents of the states they're voting in how those Republican senators vote on the procedural votes that Schumer will try to use to block the Republican nominees. Even if the senators involved don't specifically vote to confirm a nominee, if they vote the wrong way on the procedural votes, they can still be held to account by the candidates running against them. It could still be a death blow to them where the races are very close. They're very close in Montana. They're very close in Colorado. They're very close in Maine. In fact, not only are they very close in Maine, recent polls showed Sarah Gideon ahead by 10 points. The wrong move now, before the election, would kill Susan Collins. It would be the final death blow to her. Okay. Tom Tillis is in a bad spot against Cal Cunningham in North Carolina at this point. The wrong vote could be a death blow to him. I'm telling you, this is really a great proposal by David Sirota. So, I'm not going to go over the Joe Biden part of this because we're already at 10:25. I'll postpone that to next week. But now I want to consider your various comments. I hope you've been active in providing them at this point. There are the various greeting comments, which I will skip. Steve says, share it everywhere. Thank you, Steve. Stephen DeVore says, I've shared everywhere. Thank you, Steve. Romano says, how are you feeling tonight? Well, I'm feeling fine tonight, but badly about RBG, of course. Susan says, Trump had all worked on Justice Kennedy to get him to retire so they could get someone younger in during Trump's presidency. Why didn't the Democrats do this, with RBG? Because the Democrats expected to win in 2016. And remember, by early 2016, the Republicans were doing their best to block, but Garland, already, if you're asking why the Democrats didn't do the same thing when they had control of the Senate in 2000, About 13, okay, and 14, the answer to that question is they didn't expect to lose. So they didn't think that, okay, it was necessary to try to get her to retire. They were waiting for some of the Republicans, okay, to die off, like Scalia and Thomas. Deborah Wilson says, hi. Hi, Deborah. Alvaro says, probably pandering to the Republicans as usual. Alvaro says, read a headline a few minutes ago that Agoff is going to choose a woman scoreless replacement. Yes, he is. Hope she's not a QAnon. Steve says, you get to a certain age and you know you'll be dead soon. That's fine. Why aren't young people rioting in the streets? Over which? Either over RBG's replacement. He has not announced a replacement yet. I read a headline. Case says, big crowd has been in front of the Supreme Court in D.C. and others around the country, Steve. And Alvarez says, Antifa group is intending to start nonstop protests beginning October 21st nationally. I wish they could start tomorrow. I wish so too. We need them to start tomorrow. We need to have a movement of movements. We need to have the Black Lives Movement for justice joining together with the Justice Reform Movement, with the Medicare for All movement, with the Green New Deal movement. We need a movement of movements of everybody joining together for different forms of justice. Steve says, Adolf Twitler, laugh out loud. Adolf Twitler is always funny. And Susan links to a Vanity Fair article about Donald Trump, Justice Anthony Kennedy retirement. And Kay says, wonder where Evelina Ponte tonight, probably out salsa dancing. Well, I don't know if she's here in Washington. I guess she's not. But maybe she went to a solidarity event somewhere else in the United States. Steve says, Supreme Court should not be for life. 10 fucking years maybe. We're not a fucking monarchy. Steve, that's true. But apart from the Supreme Court, there are all these lower court positions that are lifetime appointments. I mean, a great start would just be getting rid of all of the other lifetime appointments and making them 10 years just for starters. I mean, just for starters. Get some movement in those courts so the courts are more responsive to trends in the country. Carmen says, and join up with Mexico too. Susan says, I wonder if nominating a conservative, right-wing, pro-life Supreme Court justice now would help or hurt Trump in November. The answer to the question is it will increase the enthusiasm of the crazies for Trump, but it will also increase the enthusiasm of the anti-Trumpers and those who maybe don't think that being anti-Trump is itself enough. The appointment of a Supreme Court justice who's bound to screw us may persuade people that maybe, but just maybe, we need not to allow a second term for Donald Trump. Averill says, if the South secedes, it'll be Gilead from The Handmaid's Tale. Yes, maybe it will if the South secedes, but if the South were to secede, then maybe, and if the Pacific Coast were to secede, then maybe it would be possible to rejoin the Union without the South. Susan says, Trump is going to nominate a woman who is a right-wing, pro-life conservative. Yes. Steve Wolfbrand says, notorious RBG. Alvaro said, I always admired Ruth's taste in jewelry and fashion accessories. Very classy. Yeah, I thought that picture of her with the green earrings, very, very nice. Alvaro says, wasn't that a rapper? Steve Wolfbrand says, big. Alvaro says, Biggie. Susan says, it's amusing how people keep posting RGB's comment about not nominating another justice till after the election, as if Trump, McConnell, and the GOP would ever seriously consider this. Well, of course, what she was doing there is putting political pressure on. No, she didn't really expect them to ever seriously consider this, but she's trying to get everybody else outraged after she's gone that they would do this and get us to fight harder to block it. That's what she was trying to do. She didn't really expect them to seriously consider it. She's a lot more savvy than that. Someone said, quote, Ted Cruz, the snooze, unquote, is said to be installed by McConnell. Installed by McConnell? Susan says, whose bright idea was it to have Supreme Court justices serve for life? I'm afraid that bright idea was the bright idea of the founders. But of course, it is subject to change by the Congress. Congress can, it doesn't require a constitutional amendment. Congress can limit the term of the justices of the Supreme Court. Alvaro Miles says, I know, right? Kay says, good-sized demonstration in front of Mitch's house in Kentucky today, too. Oh, that'd be wonderful. I hope they can clog all the streets in Kentucky. I hope that Barr replies by sending troops down to Kentucky. That should get the Kentuckians really, really mad. Maybe mad enough to eject Mitch, even elect that bonehead player, Amy McGrath. Carmen says, where'd you see that? Steve says, Crystal Ball is the best. No, Crystal Ball is not the best. Crystal Ball is good, but she is not the best. Kay says, was on a Facebook page I followed today. Alvaro says she's sharp and courageous. That is true. Alvaro says, oh, okay. Susan says, Alvaro, I think it will be a conservative woman, but the only thing we know for sure now is that whomever he chooses will be a horror show. Alvaro says, but of course fascism is upon us. Steve says, his stupid daughter, perhaps. Steve says, it is upon us. And Alvaro says, oh my fucking God, hell yes, that's right up his alley. Alvaro says, he might pick Pam Bondi. That crook is so corrupt, the devil hides when he sees her coming. Pam Bondi, I just say the name, I choke. Alvaro Man says, wouldn't it be something if DT picked Anita Hill to get the black and women vote and to irk Hayden Biden? Steve says, sedition, sedition, fiddler on the roof while it burns. Alvaro says, wouldn't it be something if DT picked Anita Hill to get the black and women vote and most of all to irk Hayden Biden? And Steve says, Susan Collins also against a nominee before November. Yes, I know. Kay says, I don't trust any of those GOPs anymore. Me neither. Alvaro says, Riddle. I don't get it. But Avril then says, I never trusted them all. Kay says, me neither, Avril. Steve DeVore says, sorry, I had to leave for a while. Got really bad news. I have kidney and lung cancer. Just found out today. And in all honesty, I'm a bit miffed and lost in what the doctor told me. So very sorry to hear it, Steve DeVore. What do they propose to do for you, I wonder? Steve Wolfbrand said, the other guy was murdered. Steve Wolfbrand said, Scalia. Avril says, so sorry, friend. I'm glad that you have health care, though. Thanks for ducking in tonight. Susan says, so sorry to hear this. Steve Gonzo says, Kentucky, Amy raised $12 million today after the RBG news. Well, that's good. That's good. But I don't know if all the money in the world will get her past Mitch. I mean, what is she for? What is she for? She's only against, of course, she's probably for Garland. I mean, Garland is just her speed in a Supreme Court justice. Avril says, some short white dude in green was disrupting a visual, insisting on arguing with other people. He's one of those religious fanatics. Avril says, well, the woman can wear pots for helmets. We all have at least one. That's a good idea. But helmets are really needed against those guys. They're going to be needed. They're going to try and break heads. Steve says, truth is, I don't have health care. I go to a hospital clinic and they do what they have to. But I haven't paid for insurance in years. I said this before in my postings on here. If you need to get in the hospital, go to one that has a clinic. I do all my health issues there. I'll see a doctor in training at the clinic. He or she consults with a doctor and they treat the issues. I went in through the emergency room. Everything will be paid for. They haven't asked me for a dime and I already. Kay says Schumer needs to go. Avril says that's because Schumer is a closeted Republican. No, he's really not a Republican. He's a Wall Streeter. There's a difference. He's a Wall Street Dem. Actually, when Schumer was in the House long ago before he was in the Senate, he came in as a liberal House member. He really changed over time. He was even economically liberal back then. He's a sellout. Alvaro Romano said, see above post. Kay said, we need Medicare for all, single payer. It will be better for all of us. We certainly do. Alvaro said, tell them to get their money back by voting for Medicare for all. Kay says, if Rump gets SCOTUS to abolish the Affordable Care Act, Biden might go for Medicare for all. Good point, says Alvaro. Kay says, I like teach-out. I like teach-out too. The election is a joke. The machines are hackable. The mail-in ballots will disappear. And the early votes might not disappear, though. We're doing early voting. In Virginia, they allow people to early vote. But all you do is you go and fill out a ballot while you're there. And they're already in my county, in our county, Loudoun County, there's a registrar's office. And every day from now until Election Day, or maybe it's now until the 4th week in October, something like that, we can go and we can vote. No appointment, is necessary. We go vote. It's set up for social distancing. It won't be dangerous. It will short-circuit the possibility of Election Day crowd, so it will make it better for those who want to wait until Election Day. There's a vote-at-home option also, but I don't trust that because of what's going on with the post office. So we're going to go do our in-person voting, most probably next Wednesday. Steve says, the People's Convention has been the most discussed subject on Twitter, trending all day. Cool. Steve DeVore says, I've contacted my reps before about Medicare for All. I'll do it again as someone who truly needs it more than ever right now. I've done my homework and figured out how to get myself into seeing a doctor again. I need one. I had no other choice. Let's find a teaching hospital near you that you can go to. If you live near a big city, your search should be easy. I'm north of Chicago with good hospitals everywhere. Alvarado says Schumer better look to his left because they can't win without the progressives. Not truth out. Teach out. Teach out. Zephyr, teach out. Not Zephyr, truth out. Her parents named her imaginatively. I think her parents were probably 1960s hippies. Kay says, I saw there were protesters at the Virginia polling places today, too. Where the hell were the cops for that? I don't know, but I'm sure they didn't harm anything. Avril says, I'm so happy for them. I'm so happy for them, too. I don't think they're going to be effective at protesting here. We have a governor who's Democratic. The state government, is Democratic now as well. Things are going to be on the up and up here. Voting is going to be fair in the state. I don't think there's going to be any problem in counting the votes. I don't think they're going to rig these votes. I think Virginia is safe. I'm so happy for them. Alva says, do you mean sing us out? I think Bonnie is discouraging me doing singing out. Okay. I think we're about done for tonight. Okay, I will see you again on Tuesday. I'll be doing progressive short takes before then. Most probably what I'll do on Tuesday is go through why maybe Joe Biden is not winning, or why maybe we cannot trust the idea that he is ahead, or cannot trust in the polls. It's not so much that the polls might be statistically inaccurate. It has to do with the chance of error. Okay, remember, it's not only the probability of error that counts, people. It's not just the probability, of error that counts. What also counts is the cost of error. In other words, if you have something that even has a low probability, of error, and it shows that Biden, is ahead, are you in a position to take the risk that that information is wrong? So what kind of activity does a high risk of error, not a high chance of error, but a high risk of error, what kind of action does that suggest? So that's one of the things, at least, I'll be talking about on Tuesday. Kay says, good night, all. Thank you for another great discussion. Avril says, great program. Thanks. Kay says, I miss you all on the nights we don't have these. I miss you all, too, on the nights we don't have these. And Carmen says, older folks totally going for hair furor in Florida, especially in the villages. I can't believe that, because seniors countrywide seem to be turning to Biden. They seem to be turning to Biden because Trump has turned them off with the Social Security shtick lately. Rob says, hey, Yoda. Hey, Rob. And Dolores says, thank you and good night. Yes, thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming. It is time for me to say good night. I'm sorry you only just checked in, Rob. Nice to see you, though. Come earlier. Good night, everybody.